I'm Catherine, 32. Last Christmas, my brother told me I was chata, annoying, right after his wife asked why they'd brought that insufferable woman to dinner. I smiled, left quietly, and the next morning, they received a $200,000 lesson about respect that changed everything. But let me back up to when this whole mess started. Because the story isn't really about Christmas dinner. It's about what happens when you spend $250,000 to save someone who doesn't think you're worth saving. Where are you watching from today? Drop your location in the comments below and hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever felt unappreciated by your own family. You'll definitely want to stick around for what happened next. At 22, fresh out of business school, I had two choices. Get a safe corporate job like everyone expected, or bet everything on a crazy idea about digital marketing that most people thought was impossible. While my classmates were interviewing for positions with steady paychecks and health insurance, I was sleeping on a friend's couch, living off ramen noodles, and investing every penny I earned into building something from nothing. My parents thought I'd lost my mind. "Catherine, just get a normal job," Mom would say during our weekly calls. "You have a perfectly good business degree. Why are you making this so hard on yourself?" Because hard work pays off. Because taking risks teaches you things that safety never will. Because while everyone else was looking for security, I was looking for opportunity. Those first 2 years nearly broke me. 18-hour days, protein bars for dinner, turning down every invitation that cost money. But I could see something others couldn't. Small businesses were drowning in outdated marketing strategies. They needed someone who understood both technology and results. The breakthrough came with a local car dealership chain. Family-owned, struggling, considering closing locations. They gave me a chance because I was hungry and affordable. 6 months later, their sales had increased 40%. Word spread fast. By 25, I had my first real office and 15 employees. By 28, I was landing Fortune 500 clients and living in a downtown loft that cost more than most people's annual salary. My brother David took a completely different path. While I was building something from scratch, David was following the traditional blueprint. Law school in Pennsylvania, marry the college sweetheart, join a respectable firm, buy a house in the right neighborhood. David always played it safe. Good grades, respected profession, steady paycheck. Everything our parents understood and approved of. Everything I wasn't. He married Rebecca right after passing the bar exam. Beautiful, well-educated, with expensive taste and very specific ideas about how a lawyer's wife should live. They settled in suburban Philadelphia, in a colonial house that looked like something from a magazine spread. The problem wasn't David's salary. It was substantial enough for most families. The problem was that Rebecca had champagne dreams on a beer budget, and David was too proud to admit it. Private schools for their two boys because education is an investment. A new BMW every few years because image matters in David's profession. Family vacations to destinations that looked impressive on social media because the kids deserve experiences. I watched from Chicago as my business exploded. 35 employees, Fortune 500 contracts, a client waiting list. The scared girl eating ramen had become a woman who negotiated million-dollar deals over lunch. But during family gatherings, I noticed things. The way Rebecca's smile tightened when other wives talked about their latest purchases. How David changed the subject whenever conversation turned to finances. The expensive wine they'd bring to family dinners paired with quick deflections when Mom offered to reimburse them for groceries. Rebecca had a talent for subtle digs wrapped in compliments. "It must be nice to have so much freedom with just yourself to worry about," she'd say at family gatherings. "Some of us have real responsibilities." Real responsibilities. As if building a business, managing 35 employees, and maintaining multi-million-dollar client relationships was just playing house. But I kept quiet. David seemed happy enough, and Rebecca was Rebecca. Every family has someone who makes gatherings interesting, right? I had no idea how close they were to losing everything. The call that changed everything came from Mom on a Tuesday afternoon. I was reviewing quarterly projections when my phone rang, and something in her voice told me this wasn't a social call. "Catherine, I need to tell you something about David. But you cannot let him know I called." My stomach dropped. Secret family calls usually meant someone was in serious trouble. "The bank sent foreclosure papers last week," Mom continued, her voice strained. "David's been trying to handle it alone, but they're 3 weeks away from losing the house." I set down my pen and grabbed a notepad. How bad is it? $180,000 in back mortgage payments, plus property taxes, plus some medical bills from Rebecca's surgery last year. And she paused. Some other debts he hasn't told anyone about. I did quick math in my head. We were looking at roughly $200,000 to make this problem disappear completely. "Mom, why didn't David come to me directly?" There was a long silence before she answered. You know how proud he is, Catherine. And Rebecca. She makes comments sometimes about how you spend your money. She thinks you look down on them. Look down on them? I had been nothing but supportive of David's choices, even when those choices included marrying someone who took every opportunity to remind me that my success somehow made me selfish. The kids don't know yet, Mom added quietly. David's hoping for a miracle. A miracle. I could be that miracle with one phone call. $200,000 was substantial money, but not impossible. My business was solid, my investments were performing well, and my emergency funds could cover it. But I'd learned something about David's pride over the years. He'd rather lose everything than admit he needed help, especially from his successful younger sister who didn't understand real responsibilities. I'll handle it, I told Mom. But David can never know the money came from me. Can you work with me on this? Catherine, are you sure? That's an enormous amount. I was sure. This was family. This was my nephew's home, my brother's marriage, my family's stability. Sometimes being successful means you get to be the solution to problems you didn't create. Setting up the anonymous payment took creativity and careful planning. I worked with my financial advisor and an estate attorney to create what looked like a delayed inheritance distribution from our great-aunt Martha, who had passed away 8 months earlier. The paperwork was complex but believable. Aunt Martha had supposedly left instructions for her estate to help family members facing financial hardship, with distributions to remain anonymous to protect recipients' dignity. The timing was perfect, distant enough from her death to seem like normal estate processing delays. Within 3 weeks, David's mortgage company received a check for the full amount owed, plus enough extra to cover the property taxes and medical debt. Clean, legal, and completely untraceable to me. Mom called David with the news about the unexpected inheritance. I listened to her side of the conversation, hearing David's shock, then overwhelming relief, then emotional gratitude for Aunt Martha's foresight. She always said family should take care of family, Mom told him, sticking to the script we'd rehearsed. David bought it completely. Why wouldn't he? It was a reasonable explanation for a life-changing windfall. Estate distributions often took months to process, and Aunt Martha had always been fond of David. Over the following weeks, I watched my brother's family transform. The stress lines around David's eyes disappeared. Rebecca started posting cheerful social media updates again. The boys resumed their after-school activities that had been quietly canceled. I felt good about my decision. $200,000 was a significant chunk of my savings, but watching my family recover from near disaster made it worthwhile. This was what money should do: solve problems, create opportunities, protect the people you love. I expected nothing in return. No public gratitude, no acknowledgement, no payback. Just the quiet satisfaction of knowing I'd prevented a family catastrophe. What I didn't expect was spending Christmas dinner being lectured about my selfishness by the woman whose mortgage I'd been paying. But that revelation was still months away. For now, David was calling me regularly, happier than he'd sounded in years, telling me about their amazing luck with Aunt Martha's estate and how grateful they felt for this second chance. If I'd known what was coming, I might have saved myself $200,000 and a lot of heartache. December brought Christmas planning and the usual family coordination calls. David volunteered to host for the first time in years, which felt significant given their near financial disaster just 9 months earlier. "We want to do something special this year," David told me during one of our planning calls. "After everything that happened with the house situation, we're just so grateful to be able to have everyone over." I bought expensive gifts for everyone, including a professional golf set for David and jewelry for Rebecca. After their close call, I wanted to celebrate their fresh start properly. Christmas Eve, I arrived at their house carrying wine that cost more per bottle than most people spend on an entire holiday meal. The house looked magnificent, professionally decorated with elaborate garland, twinkling lights, and a tree that belonged in a department store window. Rebecca answered the door wearing a dress I'd never seen before, her hair professionally styled. "Catherine, come in, come in. David's putting the finishing touches on dinner." Everything seemed perfect. The conversation flowed easily. Dad's terrible jokes got their traditional laughs, and the kids showed me Christmas lists filled with items that would have been impossible luxuries before Aunt Martha's inheritance. We made it through cocktails, appetizers, and the main course without incident. I was actually thinking this might be our best family Christmas in years. Then came time to clear the dishes. I was carrying plates to the kitchen when Rebecca stopped mid-stride and turned to David with the kind of expression that signals an incoming verbal missile. "Honey, why did you invite that insufferable woman tonight?" For a moment, I thought she was talking about someone else. Surely my sister-in-law wasn't referring to me as that insufferable woman. while I stood 3 feet away holding their dinner plates. David looked confused. What do you mean? Catherine's my sister. Rebecca sighed the way people do when they're about to say something cruel but want to seem reasonable about it. I just think Christmas should be for people who actually contribute to our family, you know? People who are involved in our lives year-round, not just when it's convenient. The plates in my hands suddenly felt very heavy. People who actually contribute to our family? I was literally the person who had saved their family 9 months ago, and she was questioning my contributions. Rebecca, David said uncertainly. Catherine is family. Is she really, though? Rebecca's voice took on that particularly sharp edge some women master for delivering perfectly aimed verbal kill shots. When was the last time she offered to help with anything? Rebecca continued, warming to her theme. When was the last time she called just to check in, not because Mom organized some family event? I stood there holding their dishes, listening to myself being dissected by someone whose mortgage payments I'd been covering for 9 months. She shows up with expensive wine like that makes up for being completely absent the rest of the time, Rebecca went on. Look around, David. Look at what we've built here. Did Catherine contribute to any of this? If only she knew. That's not fair, David said, but his voice lacked conviction. He was hedging his bets, trying to placate his wife without completely throwing me under the bus. Isn't it fair? Rebecca was gaining momentum now. She has all that money, all that success, and what does she do with it? Buys herself designer clothes and fancy cars while we're working our asses off just to keep our heads above water. Working their asses off. With a mortgage I'd paid in full and financial stress I'd eliminated with a single check. She acts like the generous family member because she brings expensive wine to dinner, but when has she ever actually helped when we needed it? Rebecca continued. Never. Because people like Catherine only care about themselves. People like Catherine, as if my success automatically made me selfish. As if having money meant I owed them something but was too selfish to provide it. I carefully set the plates on the kitchen counter and turned to face Rebecca directly. Is that really how you feel? I asked quietly. For just a moment, she looked uncomfortable, but then her chin lifted defiantly. I'm just being honest, Catherine. Family should be able to be honest with each other. Honest. About my selfishness. While standing in the house I'd saved, I looked at David, waiting for him to shut this down, waiting for him to defend me, or at least suggest this wasn't the time or place for this conversation. Instead, David shifted uncomfortably and said, Rebecca's got a point, Kate. You have been pretty distant lately, and the money thing, it does feel awkward sometimes. The money thing that had literally saved their home. That's when something crystallized inside me. Not anger, exactly, but perfect clarity about who these people were and how they saw me. I smiled, actually smiled. You know what? You're absolutely right. I should definitely work on being more involved. I walked calmly to the front closet, retrieved my coat and purse, and headed for the door. Catherine, where are you going? David called after me. I paused at the threshold, looking back at my brother and his wife in the home I had saved, surrounded by the Christmas they could celebrate because of my generosity. I'm going to let you enjoy your family time, I said pleasantly. After all, it should be for people who actually contribute. The door closed behind me with a soft click that sounded like the end of one story and the beginning of another. I sat in my car for a moment, engine running, looking at their perfect house with its perfect decorations, funded by their perfect anonymous inheritance. Then I pulled out my phone and made a mental note to call my financial advisor first thing in the morning. It was time to make some important adjustments to my charitable contributions. Christmas morning, I woke up in my downtown loft feeling something I hadn't experienced in months. Complete clarity about my family dynamics. Coffee in hand, I made a list of phone calls that would change everything for David and Rebecca. First call, my financial advisor. Michael, I need to terminate the Morrison Family Trust immediately. Stop all scheduled payments and close the account. There was a pause. Catherine, that's the trust funding your brother's assistants. Are you certain about this decision? Completely certain. I want all automated transfers canceled, payment authorizations revoked, and a final accounting of total disbursements. The numbers, when they arrived later that day, were staggering. $200,000. Exactly $200,000 of my money, transferred over 9 months to save people who thought I was selfish and uninvolved. Second call, the estate attorney who'd helped structure the original plan. What happens when the payments stop? I asked. The mortgage company will revert to requiring full payments from the borrowers, he explained. If they can't meet the obligations, they'll start receiving delinquency notices within 30 days. And they'll be notified about the trust termination? Yes, they'll receive official notification that the estate distribution has been fully dispersed and no additional funds are available. Perfect. Clean, professional, and completely legal. Third call, Mom. This one would be interesting. Catherine, what's wrong? You sound different. I need to tell you something about David's miraculous inheritance, Mom. There was no inheritance from Aunt Martha. Silence. That was me. All of it. The $200,000 that saved their house, paid their medical bills, covered their property taxes. That was my money, channeled through a trust I created to protect David's pride. I could hear her sink into a chair. Oh, Catherine. After what happened at Christmas dinner, I realized something important about how my family sees me, and I decided I didn't like what I learned. Honey, if you could just talk to David. I'm done talking, Mom. I'm done protecting people who think protecting them makes me selfish. The fallout was swift and predictable. David called me at 6:30 a.m. on a Wednesday, 3 weeks after I'd terminated the trust. I was in the middle of a client presentation, so I let it ring through to voicemail. Then he called again, and again. When I finally checked my messages, his voice was raw with panic. Catherine, something's happened with the inheritance money. The estate says there are no more funds. The mortgage company wants full payments starting immediately. I need you to call me back right now. I waited until after lunch to return his call. Why rush to solve a crisis for someone who thought I never helped with anything? Catherine, thank God. The mortgage company is saying our assistance program has been terminated. They want $4,800 by Friday, or they're starting foreclosure proceedings again. That sounds stressful, I said, reviewing quarterly projections while he panicked. Have you considered just paying it yourself? What? Catherine, you know we can't afford those payments. That's why the inheritance was so important. I don't know what went wrong with Aunt Martha's estate, but we need to figure out another solution fast. Aunt Martha's estate. Still believing in fairy tales. David, I need to tell you something about that inheritance. I explained everything. The phone call from Mom last year, the liquidated investments, the elaborate trust structure, the $200,000 I'd spent to save his family while he celebrated a dead relative's generosity. The silence stretched so long I thought the call had dropped. David? Are you there? You? His voice was barely audible. You were paying our mortgage? And your property taxes? And Rebecca's medical bills? And what I'm assuming were substantial credit card payments, judging by the amounts involved. Another long pause. Why didn't you tell me it was you? The question was so absurd it made me laugh. Because you're too proud to accept help from your successful little sister, David. Because Rebecca spends every family gathering explaining how selfish I am. Because I thought if you didn't know it came from me, you might actually be grateful instead of resentful. Catherine, we had no idea you wanted to help. I shouldn't have had to announce my willingness to help. I shouldn't have had to prove my generosity. And I certainly shouldn't have had to sit through Christmas dinner being lectured about my selfishness by someone whose mortgage I was paying. Rebecca didn't know about the money, David said quickly. If she had known, that's exactly the problem, David. She didn't know, but she felt completely comfortable explaining to our entire family how little I contribute to your lives. She didn't know, but she was absolutely certain I'd never helped with anything important. I could hear him scrambling for some kind of defense or explanation. I'm not angry about the money, I continued. I could afford it, and I was genuinely happy to help. I'm angry about the gratitude. What do you mean? I mean you spent 9 months celebrating your miraculous salvation, without once wondering if maybe you should thank someone real instead of a dead relative you barely knew. The words hung between us like an accusation. I wasn't trying to be cruel, but I was done pretending their obliviousness was innocent. So what happens now? He asked finally. Now you figure out how to pay your own bills like every other adult in America. Catherine, please. We can't afford the full payments. We'll lose everything. Then make some changes. What kind of changes? Sell the house and buy something you can afford. Move the kids to public schools. Get Rebecca a job. Live within your actual means instead of the means I was secretly providing. That stopped him cold. In all the years I'd known Rebecca, she'd never worked outside the home. She'd been supported first by her parents, then by David, then unknowingly by me. She can't just get a job, Catherine. She's been out of the workforce for 10 years. Then she can get training. People reinvent themselves all the time. You're being unreasonable. There it was. The same dismissive tone he'd used at Christmas dinner. The same attitude that suggested my perspective was somehow flawed or extreme. No, David. For the first time in this entire situation, I'm being completely reasonable. I'm expecting you to solve your own problems instead of depending on mysterious windfalls. But we're family. Exactly. We're family. Which is why you should have been grateful for my help instead of criticizing my character. 2 weeks later, Rebecca called me. Not David this time, Rebecca herself. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity won. Catherine. Her voice was cold, controlled. I think we need to have a conversation. Do we? Yes, we do. I just found out what you did with the inheritance money. How you manipulated the situation to make us look ungrateful. Manipulated. Interesting choice of words from someone who had spent Christmas dinner manipulating the entire family into believing I was selfish. I didn't manipulate anything, Rebecca. I saved your house. You decided I was selfish anyway. We didn't know it was you. You didn't want to know. You wanted to believe your good fortune came from anywhere except the person you decided was too selfish to help. So you're punishing us for not reading your mind? The accusation was pure Rebecca, turning my response to their ingratitude into evidence of my unreasonableness. I'm not punishing you, I'm treating you like the independent adults you claim to be. This is ridiculous, Catherine. We're family. You can't just abandon family over a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding. As if Rebecca's Christmas dinner performance was some kind of innocent miscommunication instead of a deliberate character assassination. You're right, I said. I can't abandon family. That's exactly why I spent $200,000 to save your house without asking for anything in return. Silence. But I can stop enabling family members who mistake my generosity for weakness. Fine, Rebecca snapped. Keep your money, but don't expect this family to forgive you for being vindictive. I don't expect forgiveness, Rebecca. I don't expect gratitude either. I don't expect anything from people who think the worst of me while I'm doing my best for them. You're making a huge mistake. The mistake was thinking you and David were capable of appreciating help without resenting the person who provided it. She hung up on me. Perfect. I just saved myself a lifetime of funding people who would never see me as anything other than an obligation. 3 weeks later, Mom called with updates I hadn't asked for but wasn't surprised to receive. David's taken a second job, she told me during one of our careful conversations. Evening work at a legal aid clinic. And Rebecca got a position at a medical office. I made appropriate listening noises while reviewing client contracts. They had to put the house on the market, Mom continued. David says they found a smaller place in a nice neighborhood. Good schools for the boys. Just more realistic for their budget. More realistic. What a diplomatic way to describe living within their actual means instead of the means I'd been secretly providing. Catherine, I think you should know. They're doing well. Better than I expected, honestly. David seems, I don't know how to describe it, more focused. And Rebecca, she actually seems happier working than she was staying home. That made sense. Rebecca had always needed something to prove, some way to demonstrate her superiority. Complaining about her circumstances had given her identity and purpose. Solving her circumstances was giving her different identity and purpose, probably healthier ones. They don't talk about you much, Mom added carefully. But when they do, it's not angry anymore. More like confused, like they're trying to figure out what happened. What happened was simple. I'd stopped enabling them to focus their frustrations on me instead of on their own choices. Without my financial support to cushion their poor decisions, they'd been forced to make better decisions. David's working longer hours than he ever did before, but he seems proud of what he's accomplishing, Mom continued. And Rebecca keeps getting promoted at that medical office. She started as a receptionist, but now she's handling billing and insurance claims. I was genuinely happy for them. Removing my financial support had forced them to discover capabilities they'd never needed to develop while I was solving their problems for them. Catherine, are you proud of what you accomplished? The question caught me off guard. What do you mean? They're better people now. Stronger, more independent, more grateful for what they have instead of resentful about what they don't have. Did you know that would happen? I hadn't known. I'd simply gotten tired of funding people who thought funding them made me selfish. 2 years passed. I heard updates through Mom, through mutual friends, through the small-town gossip network that connects all families whether they want it to or not. David had joined a larger law firm with better pay and more responsibility. Rebecca had gotten certified in medical billing and become a supervisor. They'd settled into their smaller house and seemed genuinely content with their more modest lifestyle. The boys were thriving in public schools, playing sports, making friends. Without the financial stress that had consumed their parents for years, the family had found stability and happiness. Rebecca, according to various reports, continued to describe me as vindictive and cold to anyone who would listen. I'd abandoned family over pride and destroyed relationships over money. She maintained that I was calculating and cruel, someone who'd used financial manipulation to punish them for not appreciating me properly. I didn't care. Let her tell whatever story made sense to her. The truth was simpler. I'd given them an opportunity to save themselves, and they'd taken it. Christmas came around again. I received an invitation to David's family gathering, the first in 2 years. I declined politely. Some bridges, once burned, don't need rebuilding. They need replacing with something different, something with better foundations. I spent Christmas with friends who'd chosen to be family, people who appreciated rather than resented success, who celebrated achievement instead of treating it as obligation. My phone stayed quiet that day. No panicked calls about financial emergencies. No last-minute requests for help. No guilt trips about family responsibility. Just peaceful silence and the satisfaction of knowing I'd made the right choice. I'd learned something important about family dynamics. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do for people is force them to solve their own problems. Sometimes generosity enables weakness instead of strength. Sometimes love means saying no instead of yes. David and Rebecca had become who they were meant to be when they stopped depending on me. I'd become who I was meant to be when I stopped enabling them. We'd never have the relationship we might have had before that Christmas dinner. But we'd also never have the dysfunction we definitely had during it. Some lessons cost $200,000. Some are worth every penny. Rebecca could call me vindictive all she wanted. I called myself free.